Well, thank you all for coming today. It's an absolute honor to be here amongst so many members of our multicultural community and media that play such an important role in informing and engaging in public debate, public conversation in Australia. And it's really the strength of the Australian community that we have such a strong and vibrant multicultural community. I'm delighted to be here today as Labor's candidate for the by-election in Bennelong. As a local who's raising two sons in this community, I am very pleased for the opportunity to stand up with my local community, with my friends and neighbors, and ensure that we have a strong and vibrant education system in this country. I'm very fortunate. I grew up with a mother who was a primary school teacher. She taught me to read before I even started school. And I know the transformative value of education. It's something I try to teach my own children. And in my role as a professor at Macquarie University, right here in the heart of Bennelong, I see every day the transformative nature of that education in my students. One of the best things you can hear from a student is that they've done something new based on something they have learned. It's that sense that education is giving them not just new knowledge, but new confidence. Now, one of the significant reasons that motivated me to stand in this by-election is that the Liberals under Malcolm Turnbull want to cut $3.8 billion out of our university system. And on top of that, they want to make students pay $100,000 to get a university degree. From my work at Macquarie University with the students there, I'm aware of what a significant impact that will have on our universities and their ability to do research, to teach, on the students' ability to get that education. Labor opposes these cuts, and we will oppose them, and we will continue to oppose them on the floor of the Parliament. I'd like to make one other observation before I open up for questions. And in the last few days, we have seen the growing closeness between the Liberals and One Nation. This is a community where some 50% of our members were born overseas, where some 70% have at least one parent born overseas. I myself came to Australia as an immigrant. And I say clearly that there is no place in Australia for One Nation and its racist policies, for any racist party. That is not part of modern Australia. Now, I'm concerned when I see the Liberals in Queensland cozying up to One Nation, doing preference deals with One Nation. Let me be clear. Labor will always put One Nation last. We reject their racist policies. We celebrate a multicultural and diverse Australia. That's why we also oppose the government's proposal to change citizenship laws. Labor has blocked these laws in the Parliament, and if the government seeks to reintroduce them, we will oppose them again. We reject the Liberals' proposal to put in place a university-level English language test. I suspect many Australians, including myself, would struggle to pass that test. We also reject the Liberals' proposal to make people wait 3 additional years before they can take out Australian citizenship. It seems to me that the Liberals are saying we don't want people from countries to come to this country. We don't want people from overseas to come to this country. Well, Labor believes that one of the strengths of Australia is that we are a strong multicultural community, that we celebrate our diversity, that we welcome people to come and join this community, to share their culture, to share their industry, to share their entrepreneurship, to share their knowledge. That's what makes Australia one of the best places on earth to live and to work. I'm happy to take any questions. Are frustrated and angry with this Liberal government. People are telling me in the thousands of conversations we are having that they are frustrated and angry about rising power prices, that they have had enough of the Liberals' cuts to education, that they are tired of Malcolm Turnbull's lousy leadership, and they reject completely Malcolm Turnbull's proposals to change citizenship laws. Just this morning, I was with a group of pensioners here in Bennelong, and what they were saying to me, they're very concerned about the Turnbull government's proposals to change the pension. There are 4 pieces of legislation currently before the Parliament to cut the pension. And I'd like to highlight just 2 of those. One is the proposal to cut the energy supplement. That means that pensioners who live in Bennelong, who receive an energy supplement currently from the government to help pay for these rising power prices, well, they would lose that money. So if you're a single pensioner, that's $365 gone each year. If you're a couple, that's $550 cut by the Liberals each year out of your pension. The other proposal that people are quite concerned about in Bennelong when it comes to the pension is the Liberals' plan to increase the waiting time to be able to receive the pension. So currently, people who are born overseas, they have to live in Australia for 10 years before they can receive the pension. What the Turnbull government's proposing is to make that 15. There's no reason for this. This just seems a way to cut services to pensioners, to cut services to people who are born overseas and come here and contribute to Australia. Labor opposes these cuts. Well, first of all, I welcome the great diversity in this community. I live here, I work here, I shop here, and I know that that's what makes this part of Sydney terrific. The opportunity to be part of so many different cultures who are contributing to this wonderful area. You mentioned overdevelopment. Overdevelopment is a concern in Bennelong. We are seeing in a number of developments, some 10,000 units that have recently been approved by the state government that are coming into this community. And that is without the proper infrastructure to support that population growth. And that's what people are frustrated about. They are frustrated about the increasing in population without the increase in roads or public transport to support that growth. Indeed, the increase in school facilities. There are currently in Bennelong 5 public schools that are at absolute capacity. And the Liberals have no plan to address that except to throw up some temporary buildings. There is currently an $8.6 million maintenance backlog in schools in Ryde. And again, the Liberals have no plan to address that. Those are the things that frustrate people in this community when it comes to development. The development without the infrastructure to support it. When I was in government, we funded with the Commonwealth the Parramatta to Epping rail link. Now that rail line, fully funded, would be open and operating today if the Liberals under Barry O'Farrell hadn't cancelled it. It's extraordinary to me that a state government would come into office and say no thank you to $2.2 billion to build a new rail line. That rail line would have connected Parramatta through Carlingford up to Epping and then over to Macquarie Park. That would have been a great piece of public transport infrastructure that would have eased congestion on local roads. Let me make this point. Mr. Alexander earlier this week announced a project to collect traffic data, to basically just collect data on traffic congestion. Mr. Alexander told us that 4 of the most congested roads in New South Wales are here in Bennelong. And his solution seems to be to throw a couple $100 million at a data collection system. That's not how you fix congestion. You fix it by funding public transport and better roads. First, let me say that this is an area where Mr. Alexander and I agree. And we both also agree that we would like to see the Parliament have dealt with the same-sex marriage issue rather than have this postal survey process. This postal survey is a waste of time and it's a waste of money. It's the Parliament's job to deal with this legislation. Now, I am a Christian, I am a Catholic. In fact, I have a degree, a master's degree in religious studies. What I do firmly believe is that Catholics and Christians have an obligation to form their consciences and to act according to their conscience. Now, I know as a Catholic, it's my responsibility to form my conscience in consultation with church teaching, with scripture, also with science, in consultation with my experience of my fellow human beings, my human experience. And these are the things that I have done. I have participated in many conscience debates, conscience votes in my time in Parliament, and I have always sought to explain to my constituents the positions that I take and how they are formed, particularly how they are formed in context of my faith. What I know is that people they understand that a local member may not always share their view on contentious issues, but what they do respect is that when their local member explains how they formed their conscience on the question.
Good afternoon, everybody. My apologies for being late. There's a emerging constitutional problem with the government that they've decided to cancel the Parliament, the House of Representatives, for the next week. And that's why not only was Tony Burke scheduled to be here, but he stood up with me to talk about the latest extraordinary chaos from Mr Turnbull and his government. But on to happier topics for the moment. Tony and I are here to underscore two propositions. The first is that if we can elect the remarkable and energetic and successful Keneally as the next member for Bennelong, then that is great for the communities of Bennelong. The second reason why I'm here is it's a very good opportunity for me as leader of the National Labor Party and for me as the alternative Prime Minister to pay my respect and underline our commitment to all of the groups in the Bennelong community and more broadly, but in particular, but not exclusively, residents of a non-English speaking background, in particular, not exclusively, people with a Chinese heritage and a Korean heritage amongst others. Only Labor can be trusted to promote the issues which I think are most important to the various communities and interests who consume your media. In particular, I want to stress and draw to your attention our ongoing commitment to ensuring that young people can get access to world quality education. And I don't just speak about the early years before the kids go to school, I speak about the schooling system and our support to properly fund all schools, not just government schools, but to support Catholic and independent and religious faith-based schools. Our commitment to reverse some of the dreadful cuts to university which make it harder for young people to be able to afford to go to university. It's also an opportunity for me to underscore that if Labor forms a government, we are absolutely committed as a key economic reform to engage more deeply with our neighbours to the north. And of course I talk in particular, but not just, Korea and China and other Asian economies. We call our economic policy of engagement Future Asia. It's being spearheaded by Chris Bowen, my Shadow Treasurer, and our economic team, but it crosses all of our thinking. For example, we are absolutely committed to doing everything we can to ensure that children who go to Australian schools get an opportunity to learn an Asian language. We think that if we can prepare the next generation of Australians with the best possible quality education and indeed exposure to culture and language from the countries to the north of Australia, then we think that can only benefit. What we also want to do with our Future Asia strategy is increase Asia literacy amongst Australian corporations. We want to work with the Australian Institute of Company Directors to make sure that we increase the number of directors on Australian companies who have an understanding of Asia. We're also very committed to working with the various diasporas, the Chinese Australian community, the Korean Australian community, to make sure that we are doing more to provide opportunities to work on the people-to-people connections which these communities contribute to Australian life. So, be it in the economy, or be it in education, or be it in healthcare, we want to make sure that we keep the price of going to the doctor down so that people are able to see the doctor when they need to, not when they can afford to. And of course, as our people grow older, we're committed to reforming aged care. We think it is most important as people grow older that they have the opportunity to have culturally and linguistically diverse aged care provided to them, because we think that's the best way to ensure care for older Australians regardless of their background. Before I hand over to Tony to say a few words, if I can return back to this lady next to me who, if you don't mind me saying, she's a winner. She's energetic, she's got the brains and she's got the long-term commitment to this community. What we want to do in this by-election, it's not a competition between Mr Alexander and Kristina Keneally alone. It's a question of who do you want to represent you, not just on December the 16th, but for the next 5 and 10 years. Kristina, while she's a mother and a successful leader, is someone who will be around for the long haul. She is quite simply an investment in the community, and she has the capacity to go the distance. So when we look at this election, it's an opportunity to send a message to Canberra. The communities want active, energetic, successful representation going forward. The Labor Party is the party of multicultural Australia. It is one reason why we refuse to preference one nation. The One Nation political party, led by Senator Hanson, has views, some of which simply are racist. And we believe this country works best when we have cultural diversity. And we believe this country works best when we're getting the best out of people. There are Australians by birth and there are Australians by choice. And both the sets of Australians contribute to the Australian story going forward. Kristina understands, as does Labor, that when you live in a neighbourhood and you get people from an immigrant background moving next door, be it a Chinese Australian family or a Korean Australian family, no one is ever unhappy. When you have a business in the shopping centre and the neighbouring business is a small business run by people of Australian Chinese background or Australian Korean background, for example, then generally the whole economic vibe of the shopping centre improves. We welcome and support the multicultural values of family, of respect for learning, of respect for older people. We think that the combination of hard work, respect for family, the multicultural diversity, we think this can be enhanced if we pick Kristina Keneally to be the next Labor member for Bennelong. And I'll tell you, she'll do something else. She'll make sure that if you live in an apartment, you get better quality NBN. If you've got to Skype the family in another part of the world, she'll make sure that we've got the proper internet so you can actually have that quality of life which makes a difference. It's my pleasure to call Kristina a friend, but what I really ask you to do is if we can call her the next member for Bennelong, then we can really get this place jumping, we can really get this place going. She has all the qualities of a great leader. So thank you very much, and maybe I'd like now to invite the Manager for Opposition Business and spokesman on a range of important areas no doubt of interest to your media consumers, and let him explain why we should vote for Kristina on December the 16th.
Thanks so much, Bill. It's an exciting time for the Chinese Australian community and for the Korean Australian community. And I want to talk about 3 issues, but I want to particularly talk to all of you about it because as the people who run the media organisations for the Chinese language media and for the Korean language media, you are all in your own right community leaders. You are people who don't simply pass on information, you've also been at the forefront of leading campaigns. And were it not for the role you played in fighting against racist hate speech, we would not have won. Were it not for the role that you played in defending Australian citizenship, we wouldn't have won. But you played that role and we won. But after we won, look at what Malcolm Turnbull's been willing to do. He's been willing to say it's okay to trade preferences and trade policies with One Nation. He said he wants to have another go at the citizenship changes. And today, he's decided that if the Parliament won't agree with him, he just won't have a Parliament. We need to win again. And if you look at the opportunity that's there in Bennelong, the opportunity that we have with Keneally as a winner in her own right, but the opportunity that we have, given the large numbers of people of Korean background and Chinese background living here, we have an opportunity right now to say to Malcolm Turnbull, enough, enough. Do we really think he'll keep wanting to trade policies and trade preferences with One Nation if we get a big level of support for Keneally in this by-election? This is the chance to send that message. Do we really think he'll try again to demand university-level English in order to become an Australian citizen if there's a strong result for Keneally in this by-election? Do we really think he'll continue to decide he can just get away with not letting the Parliament even meet when he doesn't think it's going to agree with him if there's a strong result for Keneally in this by-election? Don't underestimate the opportunity that is there right now. And it's an opportunity for the Chinese and Korean community living in this part of Sydney to take control and deliver an outcome that will affect the whole of Australia. There is a responsibility and an opportunity for the Chinese and Korean community here right now that can deliver for the whole of Australia. This can be when the message is sent. No more trading preferences and trading policies with One Nation. No more rules for citizenship that pretend you need university-level English to be a good Australian. And no more games where if you think if the Parliament won't suit your purposes, you just don't let the Parliament meet. There are people who live in this part of Sydney because they have got away from countries that didn't have a functioning democracy. And today they discover Mr Turnbull won't even let the democracy in Australia have its meeting on the scheduled date. Of all the opportunities that there's been, right now, the whole of Australia will turn to the Chinese and Korean communities right here in the electorate of Bennelong and watch for leadership for people to be able to say, no, Mr Turnbull, this has gone too far. No more One Nation deals, no more university-level English for citizenship, and we want our democracy to function properly.
Listen, many Australians, including myself, have a parent who's born overseas. Many Australians were born overseas. That's fine. It's what, other than Aborigines and Torres Strait Islanders, we've all in the last 220 years come from somewhere else. But the Constitution is very clear. It says that if you are in the Parliament, not just if you're a citizen, but if you're in the Parliament, you need to only be a citizen of Australia. Now that doesn't stop people born overseas running for Parliament. It doesn't stop people whose parents or grandparents were born overseas. Both of us have got very strong, in fact, as I said, we've all come from somewhere else. The Constitution, though, should not be ignored. It's the rule of law in this country. It's the basis upon which people feel confident that laws can be passed, people can do business. The Constitution doesn't set many restrictions on running for Parliament, but it does require that you not be a dual citizen, or if you are, you take all reasonable steps within your power to renounce it. So I feel sorry for Mr Alexander at one level, and he's a nice enough fellow. He was about to retire at the next election anyway, he doesn't want this fuss. So he's not a bad fellow. But the point about it is, the rules are the rules are the rules, the law is the law is the law. And as a result, we now have an opportunity. I mean, we would have had it perhaps at the next general election. That could be in March next year or towards the end of next year. So in some ways this election is just happening a few months earlier than Mr Alexander planned. But now you've got a chance to put in a successful, enterprising, family-minded, proven leader. So yeah, I feel sorry for Mr Alexander. He's been run foul of the law. But I don't necessarily accept that we don't have a great opportunity. It's not about him. It's about you, it's about your families, it's about your community. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing on citizenship, because the way that Mr. Alexander appears to have broken the law is by having British citizenship. The citizenship changes that I referred to that were before the Parliament about becoming an Australian citizen. The university level English test wasn't going to apply to everybody. If you were applying for citizenship and you had a Korean or a Chinese passport, you were going to need to have university level English. If you came with the same passport that Mr. Alexander was entitled to, a British passport, you weren't going to have to pass the university level English test. So it was going to be one rule for people of his heritage, but a university level English test for people of Chinese and Korean background. And Mr. Alexander voted for that change, not once, not twice, but 3 times. He sat in the Parliament and voted for there to be one rule for people who come from Britain and a different rule for people who come from Asia. Labor opposed it every step of the way.
Well, I think that some people are dissatisfied with the major political parties and they're looking for somewhere else to register their protest. But I make this promise to your readers and your viewers and your listeners. We will always put one nation and like-minded parties last. In other words, I'd rather not have the job if the job involves relying upon these people to elect us. Because we think that leadership is important, but leadership where you sell out every principle and you've got to do a deal with people for whom you just simply do not agree with their views, then that's not worth it. Understand, when you vote Labor and when you vote for Keneally, what you see is what you get. So we're not chasing one nation preferences. They can do what they like. What we want is primary votes for Kristina, and so this is a hard electorate to win. It was essentially at the most recent federal election, 60% Liberal, 40% Labor. But we respect the voters of Bennelong so much, we're giving them the best possible candidate to vote for. I can guarantee that if you vote for our candidate this time, she won't be retiring at the next general election. So we're fair income. We know that we have a hard road to climb, but as you can already tell, she's pretty good, isn't she?
Okay, one question. So if the Labor won this by-election...
Based on current performance of this government, if we win the by-election, they'll cancel Parliament. No, really, it's got extraordinary developments today. Every day in Parliament, Mr. Turnbull's like sucking on a fire hose. There's just so much coming at you all the time. The Parliament of Australia belongs to the people of Australia. It doesn't belong to Mr. Turnbull, and it doesn't belong to the government. They mightn't like, the government mightn't like, that there's parliamentarians who want to do different things than what the government want, but that's democracy. But what I ask you is, it's not just about the current debate. The issue really is, what sort of country do we want our kids to grow up in? What sort of legacy do we hand on? Families go to work every day to make sure their kids get a better start than they got. All of us have parents who work very hard to make sure that we got a better start than them. It is the generational contract of human life and the generational contract of Australian politics. We want to hand on a better deal. Kristina wants to hand on a better deal for the schools. Kristina wants to hand on a better deal for the Medicare. She wants to hand on cheaper prices for going to the doctor. She wants to hand on better NBN so your kids can get access to the world's knowledge. She wants to make sure that the community has a voice over its future. Keneally is of the community, she's grounded in the community, but she has that remarkable skill. She can talk to very powerful, important people. She can talk on the television every day and inform Australia. But she can also raise her kids, be a great wife, and make sure that the community gets the voice it wants. I really just say, very rarely in a by-election do we get candidates of Kristina's calibre. You can tell the real thing from the imitation. Kristina's the real deal, and she's got the energy, the success, and as I said, she's a winner. And I just want the electorate and your communities to realise you've got a great chance to have a great champion to work with you.
Yeah.
Cost of living, number one issue in cost of living at the moment is energy prices. This is a government who, because they're so afraid of upsetting the people who own coal companies, won't change any of our energy mix. The best way to give greater control and reduce prices on energy is to have national policy which will allow investment in new forms of energy. Look at the rooftops around Bennelong. Ask any household who has solar roof panels, are they unhappy they've got the solar roof panels, or are they happy? What they will say is they wish they'd done it earlier. Only Labor has a policy to keep gas prices down for industry, to help put downward pressure on electricity prices. So cost of living, energy, Labor, number one. Then we come to the issue of people's paying conditions. Wages are flatlining. If wages aren't going up, then no one has any money to spend, and that undermines confidence. There's those energy prices. And, so on wages and on energy, the other area of cost of living I'd just put for you for your consideration. Healthcare costs. The problem with this government is they don't understand how the system works. You know, Kristina is a mum taking her son, can't go to the Eastwood Medicare clinic, got to go to Ryde, got to wait an hour and a half and be told come back the following week. Find a doctor in Bennelong who hasn't had to start reducing the amount of bulk billing they offer. And then you've got the private health insurance companies. Every time the government says they've had a meeting with the health insurance companies leave by the back door and increase the price of premiums for healthcare. So, healthcare, energy, wages, Labor's got the best strategies to reduce cost of living, and we also want to keep the price of going to university down, so that some of the parents and grandparents you have in your communities helping pay for their kids to go to university. We want to keep the price of going to university down.